Hey, Boaz. No, we're just starting now. I hope you've got your questions ready.
You guys stand there for a second, look at the sign up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Not more the fucking. It's the more yisfaki. A lot of people change the lyrics at some point, made it more lifake, more yisfake.
Like that. Sorry?
Don't scare yourself with lyrics are. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had it. Well, I don't know if you'll think of it. You might want to put little Velcro, just a little piece of Velcro.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a very good idea. Yeah,
we use that at our house for.
Very, very good idea. Did we put the SIM card in there?
Yeah, SIM card. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so let's welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to our.
Did the link went out on the group?
Yeah.
Yeah, do this. Oh, right.
Okay.
Set that where you want it.
Yeah.
Here, let me do a sound check. Yeah. Oh, it's not a video.
Okay, so welcome everybody. We are delighted to have a very unusual morning this morning. And that is that we are inviting you to ask whatever questions you want of our teachers.
Yes,
and we are delighted to have with us Shmuel Crow to start off with.
How do you toggle the sound on here?
Sorry?
The sound is not on.
1 second. Technical. 1 second, just a technical question. So, 1 second. 1 second.
I think it's in video mode.
This is the video mode, isn't it? Is it without the camera mode?
That's the camera mode. I got it in video mode. I just don't have the sound recording on. Yeah, it's video mode.
It looks like it's.
Wait, it is. It does seem like
record.
Check. And just play it in the bottom right there, I think. Yeah, works now. Good.
Okay. We have solved our technical questions. So the way we're going to do it is, let me just put that back on. The way we're going to do it is we have our computer in place now, and you can you can streamline on the chat the questions that you have, and then we will be able to answer them directly. In the meantime, I wanted just to mention to us all that today we are on the 48-hour clock, our last 2 days of campaigning for our fundraising for the Alshech Academy, and this was the campaign that we started about 10 days ago, and it's going to culminate in Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni, which is now, and it's our invitation to invite all our 1,000 subscribers to donate whatever they bring in their hearts to donate towards the sustaining of the Alshech Academy during the current year. So we hope that you will join us with that. Just to highlight a few of the achievements that we've created a list of 500 different classes that you have available with a press of a button on many subjects, including Jewish meditation, which is very difficult to hear about, the Ashlag Kabbalah, and also the source of good health. Many fascinating subjects, as well as our classic Alshech and Torah Moshe, and the Ramchal, and of course Likutei Moharan. So we are now ready and inviting you to ask whatever questions you'd like to. So maybe we can invite Boaz to start us off with a question at the moment. Boaz, do you have a question for us?
Not off the top of my head, but one will come.
One will come. Okay. Shmuel, what do you want to just give us a very quick synopsis of what you felt we've learned during the weeks of Likutei Moharan here.
So one of the concepts about learning of Likutei Moharan is that although every possible combination of Torahs, and within each Torah are sifim, some lessons are 8 sif, some are 10 sif, some are 12 sif, some are short. Although every combination and permutation of those is a legitimate limud, there is a primacy to the order that Likutei Moharan is written in. And there are even certain lessons that when Rabbi Nosson Zal wrote them down, Rabbi Nachman primarily wanted to rearrange the order of the parts. So it seems a little bit difficult because every possible combination is valid according to the 18 laws of learning Likutei Moharan found in the Bir Likutei. We've begun learning the Likutei Moharan here in order, starting with lesson 1, and now we're on lesson 2. And we should note a little bit of the importance of preceding lesson 1 before lesson 2. In lesson 1, one of the things we learn is how to receive life force and happiness from all the things around us. And in lesson 2, we learn about cutting out nonsense. Now, there's deep secrets involved in these things. The cutting out of nonsense is the secret to the prayers of Mashiach, the way that Mashiach is the type of prayer that we have access to also. As well, one of the subjects we've discussed is that one of the differences between Mashiach and regular folk, or even other tzaddikim, is that Mashiach only has access to this certain type of Mashiach prayer that is specifically by eliminating nonsense, basically, not just sin, but things that are not clearly good, clearly beneficial, or clearly have a mitzvah to them. Are we still on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So it's very important that in all of our efforts to make ourselves and our surroundings holy, that we don't become sad, we don't become depressed. It has explained differences in sorts of sadnesses. Maybe someone can't hear.
Yeah,
Wow.
they can't hear for some reason.
So it's very important that we don't become sad in our work. So we need to find a source of renewable life force. There's an idea that there are two sources of life force, or shefa. It can be very basically categorized as the good one and the bad one. And we want to tap into the good one, of course. Maybe we could say that the most basic difference between them is that one doesn't have like a carbon footprint, so to speak. There's no negative side effects that come from the shefa from the side of good. The side of bad also can give people, it's like the dark side in Star Wars, it can give people cool abilities, and it can give people influence and how to win friends and influence or whatever. But the problem is that there's incidental damage. People who come up that way, there's no way they can avoid stepping on people's heads, even if they make it up to them later. There's always some kind of a dark side to it. The Hebrew term for this is achizas aklipes. It isn't the fault of the person who's receiving the shefa. They could have the very best of intentions and even be acting in a very principled way. But there are forces in the world that would like to get some of what the good people have got, even though these forces themselves aren't so good, and they seize the opportunity. They have a lot of zerizus. They have a lot of alacrity. It's kind of an obscure Hebrew English word, alacrity even, but they're very on top of their game. So the only way to protect ourselves from them is to receive our life force only from the side of good, which is inaccessible to these klipas, these not well-intentioned forces. And you could say that in an abstract spiritual way. You could even say that certain people or certain groups of people, certain bodies of people, be they government or companies or something, that they want to sort of glom on. So one who receives his life force only from the side of Kedusha. But the issue is that we're receiving our life force from somewhere. Why was it so difficult to leave Egypt? Many of the Jews didn't even leave with Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? I mean, they were in slavery, but they also had their basic needs met. They complained in the desert, we don't have big pots of free fish out here. So they had big pots of free fish. And so it's very hard to get ourselves to change anything when we have what we need, at least on a basic level, even if there are downsides to the way that we're getting the things that we need. So in Likutei Moharan 2, we're already talking about ways of eliminating these heavy side effect sources of shefa, of divine inspiration, and just stuff that comes into our lives, useful stuff. And so, but before we start eliminating, we need to make sure that we're not going to be deficient in our basic needs. So it's very important that we not only learn, but that we make a strong effort in Likutei Moharan 1, in particular, as a foundation to all the other teachings in Likutei Moharan, and very notably Likutei Moharan 2. There are extensive books written on the basis of Likutei Moharan 1. So there's a set of books called Likutei Halachos it explains the Likutei Moharan according to how it applies to all of at least all the major laws in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. And it is both an explanation and it also is an example of how we can use the Likutei Moharan. And so while Likutei Halachos is fairly comprehensive, covering nearly the entire Likutei Moharan, there are many other books written specifically on Likutei Moharan number 1. There's a book called Nachas HaShulchan, the Sherne Rav, which goes through the entire series of the Shulchan Aruch, the order of the Shulchan Aruch, only according to Likutei Moharan number 1. My teacher in Breslov wrote a book of like sort of a therapy methodologies, healing methodology to heal oneself and others, entirely based on Likutei Moharan number 1. We spent a year and a half of classes, hour-long classes, expounding upon the Likutei Moharan number 1. And even then, we didn't finish the whole thing. So Likutei Moharan number 1 is included in all of the other teachings of Likutei Moharan, and it's very important to make a strong effort in Likutei Moharan number 1. The basic principle being to look upon the intellect, the divine inspiration in all things around us. This can be determined based on the intelligence, our appreciation of this sheer intelligence of the thing, and anything has that. We can. A metaphor I received was, if you go into the woods with a microscope, where we do go into the woods usually for hisbodedus, but for talking to for talking to Hashem in a private way, because the woods is a good place to sort of get away from the hustle and bustle of the things that would distract us. And we don't usually bring a microscope in, but this metaphor uses a microscope. And when one looks at the forest, they see a whole world of things going on. And when you look at a single rock or a single clump of dirt under a microscope, also, you see a whole world of things going on. There's nothing dumb. There's nothing that isn't filled with intelligence. So if we can only utilize that intelligence and get life force from it. And so this essential step of appreciation before judging is the first step that we discussed at length in the series of classes on number 1. You may have you have a question at this point.
No, we're still we're still soliciting good questions. I'm waiting for a good question to come through.
Okay.
So carry on.
Now, I should say within Likutei Moharan that there is a bit of a warning about this process. That we're not saying that we're going to get all the life force we need from a single rock and we're going to stare at it forever. And this is why it's a metaphor to go in the woods with a microscope, but most of us aren't encouraged necessarily to do this on any sort of a regular basis. This is something that Rabbi Nachman says that the Seichel Shebechol Davar Meir B'chol Derechov, it lights up always, not just ways of deep contemplation that take a long time, because we do have a lot of things we're doing in our day. To expand that point a little bit, in Likutei Moharan 10, Rabbi Nachman discusses 3 levels of the mountain and the field and the house, and that all of our effort is focused around the house. And the basic difference between these levels is that the mountain is a very inspiring place. One may think thoughts on a mountain that they don't think in other places. You could chalk it up for Gashmis reasons. The air is different. The pollution doesn't access them as much. The air is also thinner. If you've been like to Colorado or places like this with very high mountains, you also can see much further. I saw a statistic about people working in offices. The people who have a nice window in their office tend to have better mental health, because there's something important about being able to see a long distance, regardless what in particular you're looking at. So the mountain is a very inspiring place. That being said, in our day-to-day life, that we need to do things and help people, we don't always have a nice window. So we need to go to a place with a nice window sometimes. That's the mountain. But we aren't encouraged to stay there for extended periods of time. The next level is the field. And the most basic difference between a field and a mountain is that a field is flat. A field is a place that you could build a house. It has potential to build a house. Another difference is that people are found in the field. Some people, not as many people as like in the city, which we could call the city. It's getting much closer to the level of house. It is where we've taken the intelligence and inspiration in our surroundings and we've actually made stuff out of it. And so in the field, we can sort of, I guess we could do field research. We can take our ideas and we can sort of try them out. And we can take the inspiration that's in everything around us and start to, we're not going to take an obvious thing like this rock has these minerals and therefore I'm going to take on this behavior. I saw this interesting shape in a tree And I appreciated how God did it, and therefore I'm going to arrange the furniture in my living room according to that shape. No, that's preposterous. We aren't encouraging to do that. And I don't think that anybody would actually think to do that. However, one might think that this avoida sounds stupid based on that kind of line of thinking. They might think, oh, you guys are saying, one, you should just go hang out on the mountain forever, and you should just deeply contemplate forever. No, we're not saying that. And that subconscious or conscious tick should not hold us up from receiving the life force that Rabbi Nachman says we can receive in the first Likutei Moharan. Another thought that someone could have, sort of an, I guess, accusatory thought about this avoda, is that we're only is that we're going to do it in a very obvious way, that we're going to take some kind of spiritual concept and sort of force fit it onto our surroundings and sort of live this sort of baseless ritual lifestyle. Of course, we have lots of rituals, but they're very old and very developed and very explained. And the way that we can benefit from them in tangible, perceivable ways is also very well expounded upon. It isn't rituals we're just making up on the spot here. So one should also not think that we're attempting to do some sort of wizardry here. That's asur. That's asur midiraisa. So the field is a very important zone with regard to this. This is where we allow the inspiration that we get from things to sort of flush through us in sort of a general way before we make any piski din and come up with any specific behaviors that we're going to change. It's a little bit like if someone, so let's say that someone's a musician, and they're playing a song and they're playing it sort of poorly. And they can see on their teacher's face that they aren't enjoying the performance of the song. And so they ask their music teacher an overly technical question about, well, maybe what you didn't like about my playing is that I held that one note a little too long, or that my fingers didn't quite switch on the keys at the right time, and so there's a little flub extra note in there. Teacher, hold on, buddy. If you get all these chachmes are ideas that come into our mind that aren't actually such beneficial, but they sort of sound smart to us. And so sometimes we think them, and they're mebabel our thoughts, and they mess up our thoughts. Mebabel is sort of what it sounds like. Sometimes we speak them and wind up saying things they don't have a lot of content to them, although they sort of seem to us to have content to them. People don't go around saying things that they don't think have any content, generally speaking. But just because they think it has content doesn't mean it may be chachmes. Rabbi Nachman says in Likutei Moharan that's not even really considered speech. It's sort of like in the Be'er Likutim, he compares it to like sort of how a monkey looks like a human, but and does some things like a human. There's like monkeys painting and stuff. You can find videos on the internet of such things, and they can do simple puzzles. But in other ways, they're completely nothing at all remotely like a person. They can't write a book. That's a big, real categorical difference.
Okay, I think we have a question.
We have a question.
So, Boaz.
Well, I have a series of questions.
Oh.
We have Mashiach Alley here in Tzfat. Do we actually know that the Mashiach is either one, Yosef or Nabi, going to appear here in Tzfat first? Do we know any of
there's a lot of different questions. Let's address the question about Tzfat. Mashiach will come from the north. Tzfat is in the north. Not only is Tzfat in the north, the word Tzfat is based on Safon, like north. Safon, Safun means hidden. A safina is a boat. Yeah, I know the spelling different, but it's tzeruf. You can do that. And in the Gemara, actually, you even see if someone is looking down at you from the roof deck, you might want to be mistafin, which is spelt like boat, like hide. So it's a language of hidden, and it's a language of north, and Tzfat is sort of a place of hidden secrets. It's people who don't have any connection with this place don't necessarily know that this place exists. It's not like Jerusalem that everybody in the world knows has some idea of what Jerusalem is. Tzfat is rather hidden, and yet both the Shulchan Aruch and the Rizal come from Tzfat, and these are things that have basically there's no aspect of modern Judaism that does not in some way root from one of these two guys. Mm-hmm. Ask a chacham and they can draw you the lines to connect to one of these two guys. Right? So a little bit more about the Indian of the north. In the Zohar, the directions are a little bit different. We would think of north as being like in the North Pole, but so we think of that as up, or perhaps you could think of it as forward. That's the way our maps are typically oriented, in the way that we hold a compass. And, that being said, in the Zohar, the Beis Hamikdash is the top of the world, and so up is, well, depending on where you're standing, up. I mean, it goes around the world. Essentially, up is facing east, so that even if you're on the other side of the Beis Hamikdash, you go around the world, and that's called up. And so then what would left be? Left is north. So north is the side of Gevurah. Okay, so look at the letter base. The letter base is open on the left, right? And so there's two variations. There's with the dagesh, the dot in the middle, and without the dot in the middle, the base or vase. And that dot represents the tzaddik. And the tzaddik can do something very special, which is that the tzaddik is able to not only face that way. We don't usually face that way. That is the direction from which things come from a chaos state into an order state. And so it's sort of scary to face that way. It's a little bit like, I guess, making your own wine could be an example of that. It's actually, you could just go to the store and buy it. And that's really what most people do. But those who are extremely careful about Pesach, for example, will be careful to make their own wine, even though this is a much more involved sort of chaotic process. You have to mix these ingredients and they just do their chaos thing in there and it produces wine. So we can call someone who makes their own wine on Pesach for that inyan at tzaddik. Tzaddikim and all inyanim are able to face the direction that things are coming into the world from a chaos state. Most of us know this as Gevurah. And then tzaddikim can actually enter and can actually leave out the side of the letter base. And they can continue out into that space and influence things as they're coming into the world. We discussed this idea in Likutei Moharan too about Mashiach, that Mashiach goes under the nose of Hashem, where in these streams of chesed and gevurah that they enter the world of blessing and punishment, enter the world. And Mashiach's job is to direct those flows, but he's got to go out of there to do it, right? So where do tzaddikim get their courage that they can do this from? Because gevurah at its root is bina, and so what is fearing a situation? It's primarily when we don't understand it, and so we don't know what's going to happen, and that's scary. And moreover, we don't know how we're going to deal with it properly. And so someone who knows these things, so a tzaddik who knows the entire Torah, and pretty much any issue in the world is addressed by the Torah, thanks to Halacha particularly. We have to know every situation, we have to know, is it kosher or is it not kosher? And that's a complicated conversation. But tzaddikim are good at these complicated conversations. They're very learned. So Tzfat is, so that's the idea of Mashiach coming through Tzfat, that Mashiach comes from the north, which is both hidden and is also the place from which all things come into reality. And we can understand this concept better from Likutei Moharan too, that Mashiach directs the flows that enter the left side of the base, which is north, according to the directions of the Zohar, which is the language of the name Tzfat.
So have you actually got the date for us yet?
Of when Mashiach comes?
Yeah.
It's Asr.
It's Asr.
It's Asr to tell you the date.
Okay, thank you for that question, boys. Thank you.
You have a series, you said.
I have another one on that.
Okay.
Is the Mashiach going to go to Hebron to connect with the patriarchs like David did? Is that?
That is a question of Techiyas Amesim. So in Breslov, in the Likutei Halachos, there's an inyan that's discussed. Why is Techiyas Amesim mentioned so many times at the beginning of the Shemona Esrei? Without a clear mention of Mashiach, there is a very clear mention of Techiyas Amesim multiple times. Because what is Mashiach coming to do? Ultimately, Techiyas Amesim. He's going to gather the exile, those who are exiled. Mashiach does that. And Mashiach, he's involved in the construction of the Beis Hamikdash, but all of this is to the end. The Beis Hamikdash brings into the world the manifest ability to do such supernatural things as Techiyas Amesim. By the way, I should say that is mitzad kedusha, as per what we discussed at the beginning, because there's a question. There's many stories of people who have asked tzaddikim to revive their deceased loved ones, and the tzaddikim have told them to pray, and that techiyas amesim will come. And that isn't to say that the tzaddikim are unable to do so. But if we start reviving good people, then the floodgates open. Just revive anybody. So when techiyas amesim is coming, mitzad kedusha, we don't need to be doichech hazman. We don't need to press for time and feel like frantic and urgent. We must revive them now. Pray for techiyas amesim specifically, and with techiyas amesim can't happen without the Beis Hamikdash. It can't happen without Mashiach. So what you asked about Hebron. If you visit Hebron, there's a tunnel there that's there's a little thing that you can smell Gan Eden there, and there's a staircase that goes down also into Gan Eden, and there's a series of tunnels. And it's said that the tunnels, at least Mitzvah Kedusha, that the tunnels, all the most righteous who are buried in all places in the world will return to Eretz Israel through the tunnels, and one of the opinions about where they will emerge is Hebron.
Thank you so much, Rav Shmuel. Thank you so much. May you be blessed, and thank you for teaching us. And Chodesh Tov to you. And we're looking forward to continuing our wonderful Yukdim Maran next week.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hanan.
It's just straight questions. We're not going to do any book reading.
We might do, but
whatever anybody wants.
We're in exploratory territory here.
Okay. All right. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Shavua
Welcome,
Tov.
Shavua Tov, Chodesh Tov. Welcome, Hanan, and I'm sure we have lots of questions for you. But would anybody like to start with an initial question for Hanan, either on anything that we've learned in the Torah Moshe or Pachat Yitzchak, or anything else that you feel that you'd like to tap into the wisdom of our holy teacher?
You know, there's a tradition of open question and answer with specifically North American rabbis.
Yeah.
And the best ones, there was a series of tapes when I was in yeshiva of Rav Shmuel Yaakov Weinberg. He was a student of Rav Hutner, and he was the son-in-law of Rav Ruderman. He was a Rosh Yeshiva there in Ner Yisrael, and he would give brilliant. He would go to communities and just open. And when he said something, it wasn't like Torah enrichment and fun stuff and things to think about. It was authoritative. It was dat Torah on all kinds of questions, and it was really amazing. And Rabbi Yitzchak Breitowitz, who's a student of his, and his father-in-law, Rav Ruderman, he's the best guy I know. He has a regular YouTube channel where he teaches, I think he's the Rosh Yeshiva of Har Sameach currently. And he has these amazing, all kinds of time. He sits there and I watch in awe. So we're not going to do that today. In fact, I feel like I'm sitting, I don't know if they have this outside of America, but you have these county fairs. And they have these people sitting there like on top of a pool of water with a target behind them, and you can practice your pitch. So that's what I feel like right here. So let the games commence. Okay.
I hope we make you feel more comfortable than that.
Well, for the sake of Torah and for the sake of Am Yisrael, we should be a conduit here for engaging in a way that opens up whatever inspiration God needs to reveal to us about whatever topics and questions.
So I have a question, and that is that we're in Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. And the instruction is that, in Rosh Chodesh, we should increase our happiness, increase b'simcha. So I would very much like to hear from you techniques to allow us to do that, especially when we're surrounded, as we were this morning, by booms of explosions left, right, and center. Apparently, there were 50 rockets that were sent in our direction this morning. Whilst we're involved in such bitter experiences, how are we supposed to increase our simcha?
Okay, that's a fair question. I could just tell you how I relate to it personally. I feel like where Chazal say, "Kishem shemish nechnas av mema'atin b'simcha, mish nechnas adar marbin b'simcha," right? That's at the end of the Gemara in Tanya. It says, just like when you go into Av, it is appropriate to reduce in your expression of Simcha. So to an Adar, you increase it. And the Halacha, even in Shulchan Aruch, they bring that practically speaking, Av is an inauspicious time. If you need to pursue something in your destiny that's in question in the balance, and there's obstacles and there are forces of negativity against you, then it's not an opportune time for you, because there's something about the time itself inherently that does not allow for the expression, the full-blown expression of things that will make you happy. And whereas in Adar, you're advised, if you have a court case against a non-Jew, etc., try to make it in Adar, because literally, physically, in that month, in that time, it is of good portent to you. So what I believe that means is that there is a haftacha, just like it says in the Megillah, where it's so fascinating how Mordechai tells Esther, if you don't go and take advantage of your station and do this thing, you risk losing yourself and your line. But Am Yisrael is not in any danger. If it's not going to be you, it's going to be somebody else, because we have it in the bag. We know God is not going to forsake us. And it needed Mordechai's incredible clarity to hold on to that. But that's really the point. In Adar, we know there's a heightened awareness that we know that no matter how bad it looks, and when they're dropping bombs on me, indeed is our time. And just like when we were in doubt, we were susceptible and vulnerable to the Amalek inside in Purim, and Mordechai vindicated God's Yeshua, salvation and redemption for us, and indeed for all time. That was because we know that the Geula is inherent, and so much so that to be able to tap into this, Imamish expresses itself in real time for you in the month of Adar. So I try to remind myself that it's key to be living with the times, and to allow the truth of, meaning what happened historically in Purim was just an expression of a truth that I can't help but remember that in Adar, and I'm very happy. And the more you allow yourself to express Simcha, whether it's dancing around the kitchen table with your kids, or even feel, it's okay to take some 15 minutes that normally on a regular week you wouldn't have it, but to sit with some friends and have a drink, and to try to remind each other and encourage each other how we have such amazing geula to look forward to, and that we need to be happy, and that there are many reasons to be happy. So there's an activity involved to magnify, but I think for me it relies on this emunah that you have to have. It's not just a behavior, there's to tap into the reason why, and allow that to be the generator and the battery for true simcha.
Beautiful. Any questions from the floor?
Shlomo, you don't like that. You seem that's not enough for you.
Yeah, I like it.
No, because feel free if you want. Yeah, I'm happy to discuss. Okay.
You're okay. Boaz, any?
No question. I heard an interesting comment the other night. The difference between joy and happy is you're supposed to be joyful, and when you're doing a mitzvah, particularly davening to Hashem, and that's got nothing to do with being happy the rest of the time, which gave me some peace, because I'm going around thinking I'm supposed to be happy all the time, and that's not what.
So I believe that the terminology happiness that we bandy about as Americans is kind of a myth, and the Torah has 10 different words in Hebrew for simcha.
Oh.
And there's a medrash in, I believe it's Shir HaShirim, and there's a famous pirush from the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, on you have sason, simcha, etc. Like we sing to the bride and the groom. And he talks about all the differences, but essentially, generally, simply in Judaism, when we talk about simcha, it's joy, and joy is the deep. It's the comfort and the security of being in a meaningful, knowing that you're living something meaningful, you're investing in something meaningful, and that is a happiness that's beyond happiness, what we describe as chasing some sort of fantasy of living a lifestyle of materialism, that they encourage in America. So the idea of happiness, that everything's always going, that there's no tension and there's no anxiety and there's no problems to solve, and that you have peace and quiet, you don't have to worry about anything, that's not a Jewish idea. And in fact, Yaakov Avinu, there's a famous medrash that he tried to do that, and that's when God sicked on him the the struggle of the story of Dinah and the sale of Yosef, because he wanted to be secure and say, I got nothing to do down here. Life is, how can you be happy the way you would typically think about it if you think of all of life here, every moment that you have is just an opportunity to invest in something beyond? Meaning, how can your work ever be full? Meaning, so Rav Shmuel Yaakov Weinberg, who I noted before, he pointed out once that the first time it ever uses in the Torah the word for satisfaction in relation to somebody who passed away, somebody's legacy, it says by Avram Avinu. It says, Vayigva Vayamos Avram Zaken Visavea, that Avraham died old and satisfied. And he pointed out there that satisfaction only comes after death, but not before, because the second you're satisfied, you're effectively finished. So somebody who always sees their life as another opportunity for something, he's got no time to seek out satisfaction. He's not looking for satisfaction in this world. He's looking for every opportunity to invest in something. And then finally, he can accept when his time is over and his mission is done, he can look back with satisfaction. So the joy is it's a sense of being involved in something so meaningful. Like, I have so much joy that I'm a Jew, that I'm a Ben Yisrael, and that I get to live, that I was chosen, my soul, of all the eras in history, that would be so awesome to be a Jew. Like, now, when everything's hitting the fan, it fills me with so much, like, it's all real, and this is so exciting and so meaningful and so precious. Even if I'm worried about, things in life, which is the state of human experience, but in a deep, deep way, I'm truly happy, satisfied, grateful to see God in my life and personal, and what I get to be a part of that's bigger than me. So those things are the joy, that we talk about in Judaism. But happiness is, I think, probably a different concept.
Yes. It can be very difficult to be happy or to feel happy. It's not like a switch, that switches on and off. Like, for instance, you have certain personal situations. I can imagine that for some people it's very difficult to be happy.
Right.
You can pretend that you're happy, but it doesn't mean that you are happy.
So in the West, we relate to these things as moods, ethereal passing whims that we're trying to capture in a bottle, but we don't even understand why they come and why they go. And the truth is that when we talk about these things, maybe we'll say from a Torah perspective, these are modalities of consciousness. These are approaches to life that one must train themselves in practice to orient themselves fundamentally to the world and to their experience of life from that way. So it's not just good enough to adopt or hope or do things to try to hoping that whatever stars line and you'll be in that mood of happiness that you're looking for. It's not about chasing butterflies with a net. It's more about how can I train myself to orient myself in my mind and in my interactions and in my values and in my experiences and practice, that I'm engaging in life on that wavelength, that I'm resonating in a place that allows for joy.
In other words, can joy be independent of events?
Absolutely, it has to be. It has to be, because we usually think of happiness as, therefore, we have to control the situation around us, because if only this and like this and like this, and I'm victimized by my lack of happiness because it's totally reliant on circumstances outside. Exactly, that's such a beautiful point. From the other perspective that we're advocating, it's independent of that. It's on you, and it's something that's possible regardless. And it doesn't mean that you can't have emotional responses to the realities outside you. You have to relate. I'm not advocating at all people being delusional and being a Pollyanna, but what I'm saying is that you cannot deal with life appropriately and effectively in a true way if you're not coming from that place where you're independently joyful and in your best place.
You see, the difficulty we have with this is that when we experience something that it's not pleasurable, not joyful, are we supposed to ignore it and say and pretend to ourselves that we're joyful even though we're not? Because if you say it, you become it. Or do you vent the fact that you're unhappy about something to release that energy from you so that you can then enter into a state of joy?
That is an excellent question. I think that there is no rule of thumb, because it all has to do with appropriateness, where a person is, what he's struggling with in his journey, and what the appropriate resources he has around him to appropriately do whatever he needs to do. But what I will say is that this touches on, perhaps you can think about it like this, the Mikobalim talk about how we go through life in our experience processing it is a holy engagement of filtering sparks. So in the very experience itself, one trains oneself that in experiencing an interaction where there's, let's say, a collateral emotional effect, you get to train yourself how to choose what you integrate and what you leave aside from the experience. You get to choose what is real and what is not. And you can choose that if this, interpreting this interaction, allowing it to cause you to feel negativity, embracing that negativity, that's your choice. When you can get to a place that that's your choice, you get to choose. You are not at the mercy of of the whims of reactions to things, but you can choose to respond and embrace those. That's already, you're working on a different level where you're not vulnerable to that. And actually that's the avodah. You're choosing, hey, I can take this experience, I can take something from this and use it to integrate myself to become closer to God or to restore something. Looking at everything in terms of, in the context of an opportunity of dveikut. And that's that's the hard work and the practice to try. That's what we're trying. That's what we're aiming for, I would say.
We have a question, a statement from the online. It says like this: I could be happy all the time if God left me alone, because I see the void nature of reality, but to Hashem's creation is not void, so I'm not allowed to ignore it.
Right. That's an invitation to higher joy. You don't want to be joyful. You want to be happy. You want to disassociate. You want to ignore. And God's knocking at the door all the time saying, hey. But if you embrace and surrender and go along for the journey, there's nothing more meaningful and more joyful than the conscious relationship with the transcendent divine. I mean, the human experience is, the paradox itself is so beautiful. If you really, really are truthful about it, you know that a human being is so limited, and yet there's something that we touch all the time that's almost infuses us, that we know we're constantly in contact, or there's an ability to be in contact with something that is beyond us. It's like, it was so frustrating to me when I was a student. I would learn, sometimes I remember I had a conversation I once had with my chavrusa. So why does God allow us to see at the edge? He allows us to ask a question, but we don't have the tools to receive the answer. It's so frustrating. And then as I matured, I understood that is the gift. You never would know that you're connecting to anything if you weren't painfully aware that you end here. And yet you're able to tefillah is such an amazing thing. You are literally a human being, as a creature, and yet you're in touch with something that's solely beyond you, that's beyond your capabilities. That paradox is really the beginning of real living. And the opportunity for joy. And I understand in the modern world why that's just seen, even from a traumatic point of view, of just never-ending suffering of the beckoning of reality. But that's ultimately we want to get into a healthy mode where we can fully engage.
So can I ask you another question? And that is that, you talked about tefillah. So when we read in the Gemara what the sages did in the tefillah, and our expression of it is such a pale example of that. I mean, is it possible? How is it possible, rather, for us to transcend ourselves into that spiritual plane when we're just in mundane activity and work? It's how do we let go of that and then propel ourselves to a place where we can commune with God, as it were, because otherwise we're just saying the words for rote without that deeper connection.
I think we're seriously handicapped today, naturally, in our ability to truly pray. And I'll share with you some thoughts. But I think we've lost the notion of what prayer is in a deep way, and we're left with rites and rituals that alienate us. And the truth is, the rites and rituals are the vehicles, but in a way, we lack the technical abilities to be able to make use out of the practice. I'll tell you what I mean. I would say the state of our tefillah today, first of all, getting together in a minyan is very hard to be focused as a Western person and not lose yourself totally to the realities of being a social animal. Meaning, how easy is it when you come into shul to just be aware and thinking about your surroundings and your interactions, and even losing focus, or just staying being aware that basically your connection to the people around you is in terms of tefillah, and you're focusing really on the words and the sentiments, or where your heart should be in prayer. And we've kind of disassociated the two things, and we're not, prayer today is totally different. And aside from that, I think really the difficulties today are that at some point, by the men of the Great Assembly, after the destruction of the first temple, they knew that if they did not give us a prescribed script for prayer, we would not know how to pray or what to pray for anymore. And that became such a replacement. And then not only that, but with the generations, people drifted further and further from a tradition to even be able to interpret it, so that most of what happens by tefillah on the best day for the average person, I imagine, is that you're struggling, you're reading words, you're trying to feel like you're talking to God and having an intimate moment, and you're using words that are not your own, and you're struggling even to understand them. Because most people don't study the siddur. The only time they ever look at the siddur is when they're actually trying to do the thing, which, right? And then these words aren't mine. I don't even understand what it's about. I don't really have a unity to it. And so, first of all, until you have, like any technical skill, until you get past the point where it's muscle memory and you don't have to think about the words, you already have the words inside, so you know what you're saying, then you can use it maybe as a guided meditation. But the truth is that really our power is tefillah. And I feel so much about our literal, practical situation in the world could be alleviated if we really prayed and we understood prayer and we accessed prayer. And we've been very, very handicapped as a generation in terms of how to approach it and what it is. I would like to see in all walks of life, in all places, even here, and there are resources, but people have to start putting it together, of an approach of what tefillah is for the modern person and how to make the best use of the halachot with the attendant meditations and thoughts that you're supposed to have. And I'm not talking about what the Mekubalim would talk about, let's say, Kavanot HaRashash or the Arizal, just basic, to understand that, they were trying, the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah said, if you don't know what it means, a Jewish neshama davens for, these are the things that a Jewish neshama davens for. Make this a part of yourself. You'll learn, you'll get in touch with your neshama. The neshama wants that, these brachot. And the Chazals talk about why the brachot are in the order that they are, and that they don't, you can use any bracha in Shemona Esrei, really. I'll just give you a hint. A person can have something specific that they have in mind that they're davening for, that they're praying for, and you could literally interpret every blessing in the Shemona Esrei in that context. I would encourage people to be creative with their tefillot, because really a person should not know the basic halachot, like the Rambam says. The most important thing, more than the words, is to maintain, to try to do everything you can that experience is an experience of an opportunity to have in contact with the divine, to open your heart and share your heart with the source of existence. Okay, things like that, talking about what tefillah is, talking about why there is a role of tefillah. In some way, it is the highest, it is, in shorthand, the function of the human species, why God created man. All that stuff, tefillah is so rich and it's everything, and we just don't have access to that. So those are some of the problems that we have to get over. But there's a lot to talk about, and I would really love, further, delving into that includes practice and work.
Yeah,
that people get more out of their tefillah.
I think that's a good class that you're talking about.
Yes, there's so many sources, and there's, you would start with the Gemara on the 5th parak of Brachot that talks about the mindset to have, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what tefillah really is. Certain chazals about Adam Arishon and tefillah, and to even, there's just. And then the structure of the Shemona Esrei, the structure of the davening, and you really start to see that there's a structure, there's a map, there's a trip, and there's an experience, and all that's just to facilitate something that, when you're armed with what tefillah really is, the most important thing is trying to get something out of that.
Well, you said at the beginning that we're living in a handicapped society or generation, and it is true that many people resort to psychedelic drugs in order to accelerate their ability to connect with the divine. What's your view on that? Does it work? Should, is it something that, do we need to rely on that crutch?
Is there a thesis that somehow engagement in that kind of activity automatically always opens up a door specifically to the divine? Is that a foregone conclusion?
No, but I think that would be one of the objectives of
So why would somebody engage in something like that specifically for that? How would that work? What is somebody hoping by triggering some sort of chemical kind of physiological reaction? What are they hoping to get out of that?
I think they're hoping to let go of their mundane consciousness and open up to a divine consciousness.
So it may put them in a state where they can, on some altered consciousness. With the question is, do they have the tools to make use of it there in that moment to do what they have to do? And the question is, how real is that? Well, that's happening. I mean, I would say like this, as people who have experienced psychedelic experiences, perhaps they are more open and they're a little bit more developed and they're more sophisticated, maybe in terms of certain experiences they had that stretch the boundaries of regular consciousness. And that could be helpful when we're in the conscious and the mundane. We remind ourselves, we tap into experiences we had where we know that things are not as limited and opaque as they are now, and things are vast and more real, and that could be inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if drugs and prayer mix at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the same time. Somebody, I don't know, does some sort of healing retreat, and they do a series, with that could, they could develop as a human being, and then that could definitely reflect itself in prayer. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if somebody wants to take drugs and then try to open up a sitter. I don't know what that's like. I don't know.
So my next question, I want to ask you, is that the idea that prophecy was lost when the temple was destroyed, and in order for the third temple to come in, prophecy has to reemerge. And so, how do we, in our fallen generation, even have a chance at teaching ourselves, our generation, how to connect prophetically with God?
Well, let me tell you. Okay, so what the truth is, I can tell you a lot about this stuff, and yet ultimately it doesn't matter. And you want to hear about why it doesn't matter. But let me tell you, okay? So first of all, prophecy, there's certain preconditions to prophecy. There's like certain conditions for a human being to have in order to be capable of prophecy. He's got to be rich, he's got to be smart, he's got to be holy, he's got to be all these things. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule. Because when God needed to talk to Paro or Avimelech in Bereshis, he spoke to them. He told them, don't touch her, So, okay, now I will tell you that in the beginning of Tanit Ve'Eliyahu, it says, he swears, it doesn't matter whether you're Jew or non-Jew, you're a slave or a king. The ability to have Holy Spirit and prophecy totally has to do with the refining of your midot. Now, there are also rules that you can't get prophecy outside of Eretz Yisrael. And yet, God made an exception for Yecheskel. And
God made what?
An exception for Yecheskel. Ezekiel's whole, his vision was actually in Tel Aviv, which is Tel Aviv is in Bavel, just so you know. Okay, so you see that even those rules, God breaks his rules all the time. In fact, the highest prophecy Moshe Rabbeinu never made it in Eretz Yisrael. So what I want to say is that we know that there are a whole bunch of preconditions on the one hand, and yet at the same time, I'm not sure. We know now at the same time, the Arizal in his Chaver said that they could have restored prophecy itself if they had the red heifer. Yeah. As if it was a technicality, they need to be pure. So depending on who you ask, there's always reasons why we don't have it. So, but let's get to modern times. Rav Kook believed that all we needed to do when on God's calendar, when it was the beginning of the process of Geula, when Am Yisrael would come home and most of them would reside in Israel, then automatically the ability for prophecy would be restored without any preconditions. And indeed, one of his greatest students, Rav David Cohen, the Rav HaNazir, spent most of his life, the end of his life at the Kotel, just waiting for God to talk to him. And his books are about the quality of Shmiya in Kabbalah and hearing. And his whole life was to be worthy of prophecy or divine inspiration. And they really believed it practically. And there's no reason among contemporaries that are involved in this why it hasn't happened yet. So we're waiting and waiting, but it's supposed to be one of the signs of the restoration. It's a late stage of the Geula and indeed the hallmark of the age, the era of redemption, is when divine knowledge is spread throughout. So somehow, soon, we should start be seeing, and indeed, maybe the next guy who comes up to you in Yerushalayim or Tzfat who tells you what's going to happen, and that he's one of these, archetypes, biblical archetypes. Maybe it's true. You never know.
And
Okay. So practically for us, though, this goes back to tefillah. What we really should be doing is taking the halachic and the prescriptions of halacha in terms of the rights, and the Torah's the Chazal's discussion on what the spirit of the thing is, and trying to find and be creative about searching within those parameters ways of opening ourselves up, that there is no tradition that we don't have because of the galut, in terms of really, really going over ourselves with a fine-tooth comb to whatever level is viable where we're at in our journey, and trying to improve as people. And I can recommend to you that really the Mekubalim that wrote Musar texts are really, for me, I think, are the best resources we have at refining yourself as a human being and making yourself a holy vessel for divine inspiration, and to try as best you can to come close to being a mishkan inside of yourself. If you look at a sefer like the Tomer Devorah from the Ramak, and you work on it as best you can, you keep on learning it as you grow, that is the work that I can't think of more practical work. That, and how you applying that practically to being worthy of the highest calling in life, which is a receiver for the divine and being a navi.
do you think there should be schools of prophecy to teach us how to do it?
That's Shmuel Hanavi. That was his innovation. There are two fathers of Nevuah in our history. Moshe Rabbeinu is called the Av Hanavim because he's a paradigm. He's the greatest of all prophets. Shmuel was the father of prophets in terms of how he gave to the Jewish people, that he invested in us and created techniques and schools, that there should be a promulgation of that, and we should fulfill our potential. And in fact, even when we're not prophets, we are known as the B'nai Hanavim, children of prophets, because even if we're not capable ourselves, that is our calling. That's what we draw from. So Shmuel started Jedi academies. And there are stories in the Navi. There's a story with Shaul that he passed by one of these schools while they were meditating, and he was overcome with the Spirit, and he started prophesying. So the time will come again. And in the meantime, what we're doing in our little way, even in the Alshech, one could say, that these are steps towards that. An academy, like you called it, an academy of sacred wisdom. We do the best we can with whatever we have to teach and be prepared for higher receivings of more instruction that can take us higher.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, a few years ago, I had this campaigning for Jewish meditation, and I felt that there was a resistance in the Jewish structure to reinstate the Jewish meditation. I was fascinated to see how Jewish meditation was very much part of our expression and heritage, and all of a sudden it seems as if it was ignored or cut off. Why is there such a reluctance to tap into what was inherently our practice?
I don't think there's any reluctance. I think it's something else. I think it's a critique. It's a suspicion of authenticity. I'll tell you what I mean. The Judaism has survived largely because of the element in Am Yisrael that is committed to the fidelity of a tradition. Now, it's impossible with the experience of Galut that you can hold on to everything. We've been through so much. I mean, that's why the Rambam wrote the Rambam. He said, once Am Yisrael's dispersed, we suffer so much. We can't even achieve the level of Torah, that everybody knows what to do. I mean, just the physical, practical conditions of the Galut. So now the element of Am Yisrael that has to hold on to tradition, by definition, they have to have fidelity. And that means that their superpower is recording and preserving the integrity of the tradition. By definition, the hardest thing for them to do is to use that and be creative and innovate. It's actually the strength that they have, right? The inability for them to innovate is what allows them to hold on to the tradition. So Am Yisrael traditionally has two camps. There's the innovators and the ones that hold on. That's La'avdo, L'Shomer, that's Yosef and Yehuda. We could talk about it for weeks. But that's not going to happen now. But what I'm saying is that because there is a camp that holds on to tradition, and it's inevitable as God stretches the goals out that we don't lose things. I'm sorry, it's inevitable that we lose things. So any attempt to reintroduce things that we don't have is seen with that's what happened in our generation. We're not restoring things that we lost. We're trying to consolidate them from new places. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a very famous sikha where he said that there are all these people coming back to Judaism from various Eastern traditions and from places where they have their own parallel traditions, and that is not holy and that's not acceptable in and of it is. But these people need to somehow transform that and filter it through their knowledge of Torah to find what's appropriate, what can be integrated in. But I'm saying that's the state of affairs. It's not that we have living traditions that are secret. We're trying to bring them back in public. Those traditions died. Here's the rule in Judaism: if there's a book, the living tradition's finished. As long as it's a living tradition, there's no book, which is good news. If Kabbalah was still the way it was in Kabbalah, that it's being taught from student from master to student for Eliyahu Navi, there would be no books. The fact that Kabbalah is learned from books today and people teach from books, that means that era is over. Anything that's a book, that means canonized. The Chumash started off, Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Leimah. It was Torah Shabbat Peh comes first. When that's done, when you canonize something, it's black and white. It doesn't end anymore because it's no longer living.
Right.
So the problem was that the integration of these things, there's going to be resistance because it's coming from the traditionalists who don't have that. So even if they'll admit they once had it, but the Gemara says that there were already in the generation after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, there was I forget if it was 3,000 halachot. Halacha Moshe Messina that were forgotten.
Right.
And Othniel ben Kenaz, he figured everything out again and he restored them, but they still, technically, they're not considered, the tradition broke. So they're not Halacha Moshe Messina. They're halachot that we have, but the tradition's broken. So that's, I think that's why probably culturally you may have experienced that.
Okay, so let's talk about the temple, because there's this debate, are there going to be sacrifices in the third temple?
Why not? What would make us think not? Where does that thought come from? Do you have a source?
Well, I heard that there was a difference of opinion.
From where?
From the sages as to whether...
That say what?
I can't remember if it was the Rambam or could be the Rambam that said that there wouldn't be actual physical sacrifices.
I don't believe that. I don't know if that says that anyway. Huh?
Elevation offering every day.
That's the norm. Some people say that maybe they interpret a statement from Rav Kook that the only things that would go on the Mizbeach are the mincha, but maybe not animal, meaning if there's no need for a human being to elevate their animal self anymore, then do animals still have a role on the Mizbeach? And yet, where is the service of God that continuously feeds existence? So it's very hard to talk about things from a state that we're of an evolutionary quantum leap that we're anticipating that we're not at yet. However, there's no reason to believe. On the one hand, you could definitely believe that everything is qualitatively different. We're not going to qualitatively different, yes. But there's no reason to believe. In fact, it's very dangerous to believe that the Torah would be any different. There may be a new levush or a hafshata, unpeeling of a vessel or an expression. Hopefully, humanity won't have a problem of murder anymore. So God doesn't have to say, thou shalt not murder. There's going to be some sort of deeper thing in that will be, these are things to think about. But the truth is we won't know. But the Beit HaMikdash we know is the hallmark of the Geula. So tell me how, on the one hand, it could be the hallmark, and yet you're going to radically redefine what goes on there and what it's all about.
What do you mean the hallmark of the Geula?
The hallmark of the Geula is the Beit HaMikdash, the era of what we always talk about. And yet at the same time, everything we know the Beit HaMikdash to be, you're going to radically redefine what its function is. So tell me what that is. So I don't know where the source is for this. I don't believe the Rambam says that. The only source that, meaning the reading into that source I'm familiar with, I know a guy who would say he cannot accept that there will be animal sacrifices, except he will concede after a long discussion with him, if the animal goes up by itself. If the animal wants it, we'll honor it. And I was like, okay, you're not being intellectually honest. But anyway, there are people that I feel that a lot of this is, meaning the only reason, the presumption comes from a very secret, hidden assumption of a modern Western man that finds it very difficult to relate to sacrifices. But I don't see any reason in the Torah for an opening of the discussion.
So what is the purpose of sacrifices?
So I would refer to, we just started talking about it with Cain and Hevel, but I would refer to the famous resource for the beginning discussion of Karbanot is the Ramban's commentary on Parshat Vayikra. Vayikra is the introduction of sacrifice, and essentially a human being incorporates into himself all orders of creation. So we know that our body has minerals, and it incorporates in it the level of vegetative matter and animal life. And we're supposed to unify all that, and in our interaction with the divine, uplift it all. When a human being wants to come close to God, where's the part of us that needs to come close? That's the part of you that incorporates the animal in it. So the sacrifice of we bring animal sacrifice and we also bring plant sacrifices. The idea that the Ramban says in short, the launching of a discussion of what sacrifices are is from the animal point of view, is that you are saying that the sacrifice is a stand-in for your animal self, and in the act of sacrificing and sending up and having godly fire consume this animal, it's a stand-in for your animal self that you're trying to bring close to God. That's the meditation. And that's why it has the power to correct you from certain spiritual things and make that powerful effect on you. So, for example, we talked about by Cain and Hevel, how the initial difference between Cain and Hevel's sacrifice was not the ingredients of what they brought. That wasn't the main difference that Cain brought from the earth and Hevel brought from animal. But it was, the Alshech points out that Hevel knew that when bringing his offering, his intent was, this should be me. I want to come close. I want to give myself to you, God. But if I killed myself, there wouldn't be me. So this is an expression of me. Whereas Cain did not. Cain just said, hey, I'm going to give God a sacrifice. That's kind of a pagan idea. He kept himself for himself. So that's the beginning of the discussion where the Alshech is concerned on this idea.
And the use of prayer.
Yes, prayer is tied in.
When you pray, not everybody has to speak the holy language. And then I sometimes wonder, what's the use of prayer? Because if you do it in your own language, you see what you pray. But if you learn the letters and learn to pray in the Hebrew, you're not even really aware of what the words mean. So what's then the use of the prayer?
Okay, so I'm going to get to that in a second. Okay, everything in this experience where we live two poles of spiritual and physical, everything has a spirit and a body. The body doesn't have to be necessarily in the